3 minutes past, and we have a lot to discuss today. So we are going to just dive right into it. Please note that whenever, if you want to have your camera on or off, totally up to you. We know Zoom fatigue is real. We will be having Q&A though at the end. So if anything is resonating for you during this talk, feel free to drop those questions or comments in the chat. If it is a question, we're going to answer them in the order when we get to our Q&A. And if you've loved anything from this talk, the stage mom here highly encourages you to share on social, and we'll be sure to drop Maaike's Twitter as well. And if you're not already following, you're missing out. I want to also to thank Provar today for letting us have these types of continuous learning opportunities. In addition to giving back to our community with these types of events, we've also created University of Provar. So if you're looking to get Provar certified or wanting to learn about new and emerging tools and techniques, highly recommend you sign up. And today's talk, we scare because we care. Yes. With Maaike Brinkhof, I am so excited about this talk. Some key takeaways we're going to be unpacking today, y'all, about communicating the value of testing as an integral part of a modern DevOps team, identifying the human costs of shifting left and how to transform testing from something that's perceived as scary into diplomatic communication that helps teams, and also scaling your circle of testing influence in a DevOps environment to help mitigate risks, improve team morale, that's right, and deliver quality products for your customers. And so this speaker, y'all, if you have not already met Maaike, I'm obsessed with them, met them a while ago, I guess with Ministry of Testing. And I was like, this person, if you have drop a cuss word along with pragmatic solutions for teams, I am here for it. But I will say what I love about Maaike. She is an independent agile tester and iOS developer. She loves testing because there are so many ways to add value to a team, be it by thinking critically about the product, working on the team dynamics, working to clarify the specs and testability of the product, getting to know the whole team with exploratory testing. The options are endless. I know. She also likes to help teams who are not sure where or what to test during analog time. Maaike likes to practice powerlifting. It's true, genuinely impressive. Reading books and drinking different kinds of craft beer. And you can follow her on Twitter for more leadership insights. And we are going to drop that in the chat after this. How'd I do on that intro, Maaike?
It was really accurate, yeah. Especially
yes.
If you list all those things that are going to be addressed in the talk, it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. And I hope in 30 minutes I will give you some insights. That's my hope, at least. And yeah, powerlifting. Woo.
We're here for it.
All about them gains.
All about those gains. With that said, I'm going to be quiet now and give you the floor.
Yep. Let me share my screen here. All right. Well, welcome everyone. And I'm so happy and I'm so grateful that you took the time in your probably busy lives to listen to me talk. I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes, I think. And if you have any questions, please note them down so Tristan can get them in order. So today's keyword is going to be scary. And I'm going to use it in a couple of ways, because sometimes we as testers can be scary to other people because we can be perceived as the bringers of bad news. Like, oh, we found a terrible bug and we scare the developers that way. But on the other hand, a transition from an agile culture to a DevOps culture can also be scary for us because we have to change the way we test. It can set you on a path to growth. And it certainly did for me when I was part of such a transition. So in this talk, I want to tell you about that. So it hopefully makes you less scared. So this is going to be a story of realizations. And in order for you to understand my story, I have to give you the context, right? So the context was that I was working as an independent test consultant for a large supermarket in the Netherlands. If you're from the Netherlands, you might guess which one it is. And I was part of the mobile app team. I was testing the front end of the app and the API side of the app. And we were technically on our way to prepare for a DevOps culture, like we moved from a backend monolith to microservices, and we were quite far in that journey already. And this is why I'm not an architect, because this is the level of my drawing, but this is the very simplified version of the architecture that was in place that I was working with. So in the top left corner, you see the mobile app. It went through an authentication proxy, which then connected to BFFs, which I'm sad to inform you don't stand for best friends forever, but backend for frontend. So these were specific APIs that the mobile app used, and the website had their own BFFs, because of course we also had a website. And then those connected to the generic services that had the data we all used. And beyond that was what I call the Oracle 90s zone. I didn't like to go there, but sometimes I had to. And as you can see, we also had still a bit of the monolith left, because we weren't done with this technical transformation. But we were slowly hacking away at the thing and making it smaller and smaller until it was gone. And we also had the tooling that all the cool kids use. We had Kubernetes, Kibana, Elasticsearch, Opgenie, all the cool stuff. So technically, we were, well, as ready as it gets to become a DevOps culture. And in my story, now that you have the technical context, I will tell you the story in 4 parts. And all of these parts resulted in personal growth for me. So first of all, the move to DevOps meant that my testing finally went full circle, and I had to learn a lot of new skills. And secondly, it also meant that I had to make a lot of personal changes. I had to change the way I was operating in my role. And that also led me to question what is the value of having one role? What does it even mean? Are you even just a tester in a DevOps culture? And I want to tell you a very positive story about how we grew as a team during this transition. And if at any part during the story you're like, Maaike, you silly girl, I already knew this, then good, feel smug for a minute, that's quite all right. I still hope that I can give you some new insights. And as always, with every talk I do, my goal is just to maybe trigger you to think some new thoughts, to give you some new points for reflection. So that's what I hope to achieve here. So let's start with the first part, and that is that testing finally goes full circle. So we have to go back in time for this one. And this is the period that I call the dark ages of my testing, all right? Because I was literally, well, not literally, I was testing in the dark. I was testing before going to production. I was in a Scrum team, we were working agile, were we really, you know? I was still working with test cases because we had a regression test phase, like we had to do 2 days of regression testing before we would go to production, which led to me having to deal with worried managers, and all because going to production was still a rare event and a scary event. And the scary event, it was because of multiple reasons. Because if you had to do a lot of manual testing at the end, this can be really scary for the developers, because what if you uncover a terrible bug way at the end that impacts a lot of the work that's done before? And it's just not great for the developers, and they can perceive you as someone who is always the bringer of bad news. On the other hand, it was also a scary situation for us testers, because after we went to production, we were like, oh, please, I hope there is no terrible bug, so that the manager would ask, well, why didn't you test that? No, it was, all in all, it was just not a great situation to be in. Also, I didn't have a lot of information about the software when we went to production, like the observability stuff, it just wasn't there. And frankly, I didn't even care too much. That's why it's the dark ages. I felt like my job was limited to the part before going to production. And if I look back at this attitude, I wonder if I really understood what testing meant. Luckily, I started going to conferences and meeting more people with different experiences, different talks, different thoughts. And well, that really helped. So this is what I call the transition phase. And I started reading books. And if you know me a little bit, you know that my Bible is thinking fast and slow, because this really made me realize that my testing was full of assumptions, biases. I thought that testing could be objective, but it cannot. And I also thought that I knew how users would use our software in production. And I realized how wrong I was. I realized that I'm biased, and in order to combat that, I figured, well, what if I start working less alone and let the team help me more? So this is the period where I started using exploratory testing with the team, and it did help. It did improve the testing. I also got more interest in the user feedback and how users always manage to find some crazy new issues. And because the transition to microservices was already started there, we were slowly becoming more modern with our tech stack, and we could look into production, and going to production was happening way more often. So it was less scary for everyone involved. I still was not fully woken up though. Let me have a sip of tea because my throat is starting to hurt. All right, now we're more in the present day, because the majority of the story happened in the period from 2018 to 2020. And DevOps was introduced in my context. And I vividly remember the exact moment. So we had about 4 mobile teams with front-end developers, back-end developers, testers. And one of the back-end developers was in the committee that initiated transition to DevOps. And he called everyone together, the whole group, like 30 people. And he was like, well, now that we got the technical stuff in order, we can start to be our own ops team. We want to move to DevOps. We won't have a separate ops team any longer, and we have to do it ourselves. And I assume that all the developers want to take part. And I was like, hold up. He said developers, not testers. But I wanna help too, you know. I realized that if I did not speak up, I wouldn't be involved in this. So me and the other testers were like, well, hold up, we want to do this too. We want to learn. We want to be part of this journey too. And that developer was like, oh yeah, of course, sure. It wasn't out of malice that they didn't consider us. I just think that they didn't realize what we were willing to learn, what we could do, what we could offer. And yes, it was scary. I mean, I realized that I had to learn a lot of new things, a lot of new tools. I'm not the most technical person out there. I'm not the greatest developer in the world by any means. So yeah, I knew that it would be tough at times, and I still wanted to do it. I wanted to be part of this. I also figured that I would get to know way more people this way, the reliability engineers, customer service, analytics experts. It felt like a great moment to get out of my comfort zone. But I do want to acknowledge that it's okay to feel fear at such a moment. I mean, I can't be the only one who has felt scared at times during work, because in IT, change is a given. We're constantly expected to reinvent ourselves almost. And yes, the fear was there. And I knew that I had to learn a lot of new skills, but I also knew that I would get new realizations about myself, about what I would be able to do with those new skills and how it would change my testing. So instead of letting the fear overwhelm me, I tried to look at it more with the lens of opportunity. So I tried to stay positive. Easily said than done, though. But well, here we were. The journey was started. And yes, this whole transition did change the way I test a lot. Remember my old style from the dark ages when we only had a feedback loop before going to production and then almost nothing. We had to change, or I had to make sure that I could use feedback loops that were all over the place, because you can't have successful DevOps if you don't have feedback loops all over the place. And a lot of the feedback loops will be automated, of course. Automation plays a big, big role in DevOps. Nothing new for you there. But what I do want to address, though, if you are like me and like test automation isn't truly my jam, it's not what I'm really good at. And you might think that with a DevOps situation that there's only a lot of work in the automation sphere, but that's not true, because automation can only be good if you think about what to automate on what level. So this whole, what we call the shift left movement, it's still there in DevOps, and it's incredibly important. And I feel like if writing test automation code is not really your thing, then this is something that you can focus on a lot. And that's what I did too. So I really tried to involve myself more in making sure that we had good BDD, that we use specification by example, that sort of thing, that we really thought about risks, all the stuff before any code is written, because there's still a lot of work to do in that space too. And I think we should not forget that, because I feel like sometimes when we talk about DevOps, it's all about the automation and the technical side of things, but there's way more. The funny thing is, though, I believe that with a DevOps culture, when you're working that way, it feels like we can finally graduate from being software testers to testers. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, again, how long have we been stuck at the technical side of things? How long have we just been testing the software, creating the best test automation that we can? We have been focusing a lot on the technical side of things, and it seems with DevOps that this has gotten worse. But if you look at it from a different point of view, if you think about it, with all the automation in place, with all those automated feedback loops, this also frees up time and gives us the opportunity to test the ideas. Because why are we building software? To get a business idea in production, right? So this is what we can also now focus on as testers. How do we know if our business idea actually worked? Well, now with DevOps, I have the tooling to actually look in production. I can see the systems behaving real time. I know how many users there are. I know where we lose them because of the analytics. I know where they get stuck. I know where we have a lot of errors. And I also know, if our business idea was actually successful. And yes, it does bring in more money, because in the end, I mean, let's face it, especially at big clients, it's a lot of the times it's about, will it bring in more money? So it's nice that with DevOps, I could really confirm those ideas if they were a success, yes or no. So again, if you're not too big on the automation part, this is something that you really can involve yourself with if this is what you're interested in. And it felt freeing, really, to go from being a requirements validator with a bit of exploratory testing sprinkled on top to use the feedback loops that were everywhere. And I especially leveled up my testing by using the feedback loops from production. The observability tooling, it really blew my mind when I got to learn to work with it and how much it impacted my testing because of how cool it is to use it. It had been a while since I became so giddy by learning something new, but the whole observability stuff, that really made me enthusiastic to really know what our users are doing and stuff, and where they get stuck. Because then I really knew if the testing that I did before we went to production was actually the right testing, and I could pivot my testing accordingly. Because, and this is a bit of a controversial point, I also wanted to do less testing. I wanted to remove the bloat from the testing process. Hear me out. I believe, and I can only speak from my context, in your context it may be different, but I believe that the extensive testing, the way I was testing before, when going to production was a rare event, it's less valuable in a DevOps environment. There's no need for a huge manual regression test anymore. Actually, there's no time because they ain't waiting for me. We were going to production 50 times per day, at least. There's no time to do a really extensive test process. So I yeeted it. I tossed it. I fully embraced the automation feedback loops that we had. And yes, I was still doing exploratory testing, but we weren't waiting for that in order to go to production. Because if I found something, we could fix it then and there and then bring it live. And of course, I mean, maybe this sounds like a unicorn and fairy tale thing, but we had big failures. Don't get me wrong, we had those. But we now had the ability to roll back in case of a really big failure. So it wasn't as big of a deal as it once was. And with smaller failures, we would be more likely to accept those and quickly fix those. So yeah, this was really, it feels counterintuitive as a tester, but I think we should really be careful that as a testers, our advice can come across as, oh, add more tests, but you have to add the right tests, right? Always think about risk, let that be your driver. So just gonna put it out there, let it stir for a while. I get it if you don't agree with me, because it can depend on your context, because maybe if you're working at a bank where regulations are way more of a thing, or you're working in a medical software context, your reality might be way different from mine. So keep that in mind. Also, how I leveled up my testing was to do less testing alone. In my dark ages, I was mostly working alone. And I, as an individual, I don't really scale well. And there's a lot of bottlenecks in the feedback loop because I'm testing alone. I find something, usually it leads to a question and I need the developer anyway. So why not do a lot of testing together? Why not pair up? That just makes more sense. It's not that I don't test alone anymore at all. I do, but I work with other people when I can. And we also did some mob programming together because I remember the good old days when we were in the office and Corona wasn't a thing. Yeah, we did mob programming together, but not a whole lot. It's not like we were constantly mobbing or something. And now with our online working realities, I have more success with pairing, actually. And I said it before, the observability stuff, that really blew my mind, leveled up my testing, everything. So use that. And now that I had changed the way I worked, I sort of naturally came to this question, like, what does it mean to be a tester in a DevOps environment? Am I a tester? I do way more than just testing, right? It really felt like I broke out of the box. That was my role. I felt more like an IT generalist, I guess, like I was just trying to do the stuff that is needed in order to get our idea to a reality and beyond. And I don't care if you call me a tester or a developer, I truly don't care. But what's important to realize is the reason why this was possible. And Jessica Kerr, I hope you know her and follow her on Twitter because she shares some amazing things. And I really want you to read this blog post. I recommend it highly, the origins of opera and the future of programming. In that blog post, she introduces a term called semathecy. I had never heard of it until that point. But that word is a thing of together and learning. And it really felt like this DevOps transition made us do this a lot more because we were working together a lot. We were working and learning and growing together. And this growth resulted in our team doing well. And this is what it's about. It's about what value you can bring way more over whatever your your job title is. And this can change depending on your context. In my context, I made the choice to go more in the automation space as well. I was working a lot with the developers, hilariously, I'm still not a good developer myself, but it didn't matter because if you pair or mop, you have the best of all your brains. And in the end, it doesn't matter who does the typing into the code so the computer is satisfied. We did it together. So this is your own personal journey. You have to find out where you want your value to come from. Is it more a technical side? Is it a totally different thing? I feel it's all fine if at the base there is a growth mindset. And if I look back at myself from the dark ages, I had a limited mindset. Like I felt that I had to stay within the borders of my role, and I didn't really dare to break out, or I didn't see the options, I guess. And with this DevOps transitions, it gave me the kick in the butt that I needed to change my ways. I do want to acknowledge one challenge though, because the world still thinks in roles. This is a real issue. So my advice would be, if you're already in a job you like, try to expand your limits, get out of that box and see where it gets you. And if the environment is oppressive and they try to push you back into your role and you can't break out, well, might be time to get a new job if you can, if you want, if you have the privilege to do so. And if you're looking for a new job, I also started a new assignment back in May this year, and I interviewed as a tester because, hey, the world still thinks in roles. So that's fine by me. I just get in first, and then I explore the work climate, and I just, test how soon I can go outside of that box. And then you also get a real feel for how the culture is. And at my current assignment, they're totally fine with me doing whatever is needed. So that's good. And as promised, I wanted to tell you the love story of my team. Because remember that moment when the backend developer assumed that the testers didn't want to be included in the DevOps culture. I truly believe, and I truly saw that he did not have bad intentions. I think he was also just stuck thinking in roles, like so many people. And we showed him that we were willing to change, that we were willing to work with him. And on the other hand, he also changed, and almost everyone changed. There's no other way, because we had to do this shit together. So the testers, they were involved a lot more in the development, but it also, of course, went the other way around. The developers had to do a lot for testing. And if that happens, if you experience each other's work and what it truly means to do that work, then the empathy and understanding, they will grow. There's no other way. The more you collaborate, the more you understand each other's point of view, because you share the same pains, you share the same wins. And this is why we as testers weren't scary anymore. Because we were allies now. We weren't at the end anymore delivering the bad news of the terrible bugs and whatnot. We were there with them the whole time. So that was great. They saw us as their allies, and it wasn't scary anymore for neither of us. And what was also great is that I got to know way more people throughout that big company. I was working a lot with customer support. When we had a new feature in the app, I would explain to them and show them how it worked, and I would make an FAQ together with them. I would deal with the marketing people to look at the campaign side of things. I helped the product owner, and I also asked a lot of time from those really patient people from service reliability engineering, because they knew a lot about the tooling. And honestly, when I first looked at Kibana, I was like, what on earth is this shit? Like, truly, the UX of that tool, it's not great. So I really needed other people to help me become more familiar with the tooling that is needed to do the ops part of things. But yeah, what was great is that I really felt part of something bigger, that I alone almost bore no responsibility because we shared that responsibility together. And even we were on call, like we had a rotating schedule, and when you were on call for a week. And I mean, it did happen that there was an issue in production and I alone couldn't solve it. And there was always people you could call, developers who were willing to help. So that was really great. You were never responsible alone. And this is only possible when you trust people. And most people thrive in an environment where trust is high. And the way it works for me is if I get to know you and I don't know you, you have my full trust. Because some people are in the camp of, oh, you have to earn my trust. No, I don't think that's how it works. You get my full trust, you can make a mistake, everyone makes mistakes, and you can break my trust in the end. So that's how it works for me, and it felt like that's how it worked for us in that context. And in my opinion, separating testing from development was such a stupid move, because this set us apart and this created this whole culture of we scare because we care, because the testers are like the herders of quality or whatnot. We were responsible for quality. I don't know what people were thinking, but yeah, this just wasn't great for anyone. We were scaring people because we cared and we wanted to find all the bugs, and developers would be like, oh shit, no, the testing police. It just doesn't work that way. We should not divide work. We should not divide the responsibility. Because again, when we were experiencing the work from other roles, that created the empathy and understanding, and that made sure that the whole scary part was gone. So there you have it, the 4 parts of my story. And of course, the thing is, and I'm sure you realize it by now, you don't have to work DevOps to do this, to find use in these things. It took me the DevOps transition as a trigger, the kick in the butt to change, but I hope for you it doesn't have to be that way. And sometimes it's really good to take a mental step back and assess the way you are working. So I invite you and encourage you to take a step back yourself and maybe think about those points. Like, is my testing as full circle as possible? Am I using all the feedback loops that are there? Can we maybe create new ones? And what can I personally change the way I test, the way I work, in order to become better or more effective? Are you attached to your role? Do you also feel like me, you want to break out of it, or maybe you're more comfortable in your role? I mean, no judgment there. Some people really like it when they have a defined role and it's really clear what they need to do. That's fine. No judgment from me. And lastly, what are you doing to improve collaboration with your team? Because I do believe that that is one of the key ingredients to make testing less scary. Collaborate with your team members and make it feel like something that you own together. Because, like I said earlier, in IT, change is a given. Change is constantly thrown at us. And now with DevOps, there was this big change happening for me that set me on a path to growth. But it never ends. I mean, in the future, there will be something new, something that I can't even fathom right now. And that will probably change the way I work again. And the meta lesson that I got from this whole journey is that, yeah, the way I used to test in the dark ages, I was more of a negative person. And if you follow me on Twitter, I get I can come across as maybe a negative or cynical or sarcastic person. And sure, that's my hobby. So I will never stop doing that. But I really had to look at my own thoughts, my own emotions, and understand them and learn how to change my ways at work. Because if you come on too strong, even if you're in a DevOps culture and you are doing this together, it can still be perceived as like, whoa. So I learned to change the way I work. I maybe got a little bit more diplomatic here and there. Sometimes I'm still not. I'm like really blunt. But yeah, I think I learned how to respond to change differently. And I hope you are not as blunt as me and you have more diplomatic skills already. And you are already awesome at dealing with change. But I do think this is something that we always have to keep an eye on, that we are willing to change our ways and take a good look at ourselves. And with that, I say thank you, sayonara. And I will take any questions that are in the chat. I totally didn't look at the chat.
Oh, no, that's what Stage Mom is here for. Don't you worry.
Okay,
I've
okay.
captured all of them. Can we please round of applause in the chat, y'all? Round of applause. Oh, this was really, really amazing, Maaike. I also was like, you're like, it's rare that I'm going to do a positive story. And so I really appreciate you just getting into it. That said, you also, one of the reasons why I really was excited for you to come share today was that you really provide such pragmatic solutions. And I think that sometimes people can perceive them as grumpy, but to your point, it's just pragmatism. Like, that's your brand. That's what I love about you. One of the things, so we have the chat is going. I love this. So we have a few questions. The first one is from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, are you still there? I do this. I call on people. Love that. Elizabeth wanted to know, first off, what observability tools were you using when you were chatting about that?
That was the Kibana and Kubernetes thing that I was using.
Okay. Perfect. Hopefully that answered your question, Elizabeth. Amazing. The next one I have is from Bhavani. And Bhavani, are you there as well?
Yep, I'm here.
Do you feel like asking your question?
Sure. Hey, Maaike. The question I had was about when expanding your role, like, when you were trying to help and learn, team with other departments. Did you ever feel burnt out? Sorry about that. My daughter is here.
Yeah.
But did you ever feel burnt out in a way that because you were doing a lot that is not directly tied into your role, or sometimes, the other teams, even before they did their research work or, the bit of tech work, they were like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? Because you had the answer, so they didn't want to do that effort on their own. So how did you handle that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And you triggered something that I forgot to mention in the talk. And that is a very important part. And that, yes, this can only be successful if the people around you make space for you and are willing to help you. And there were a lot of people, a lot of colleagues. It was quite more than 100 people. So yes, not everyone is as good as helping me as others. But because I was already working there for a couple of years, I had the advantage of knowing a lot of people quite well. And I had a couple of preferred persons that I knew were very patient and are willing to show me the ropes. So my advice is always to focus on finding allies. Like, who are the people that will help you no matter what? And regarding the burned out feeling thing, well, it's been a couple of years ago, so my memory is a bit hazy, but I can't remember feeling burned out really. It was overwhelming at times, the amount of things I had to learn. But for example, in the beginning, when I was on call, I wasn't on call by myself. So you were teamed up with a buddy, and that also helps a lot. Again, so you're not responsible by yourself, and you have a buddy who you could fall back to. And also the service reliability engineers, they helped us a lot too. So we also did workshops where we had fake production shit happening, and we would have to solve it. So there was a lot of practice. And also don't forget that this took at least a year before we were really properly into this culture. So it does take time. I mean, you can't rush this part really.
Mm-hmm. Was that helpful for you, Bhavani?
Yes, it was. Thank you so much.
I love that. And I think one other thing I would just add to that too is we don't really, I feel like we need to do a better job when we're talking about agile, we're talking about being in DevOps teams. How are we leveraging offline communication that brings in everyone together? People talk often about those live meetings and reading, nonverbal language, and I'm here for all of that. But what does it look like after you're done with the meeting, right? Maybe someone did something awesome. I know it seems silly, but how are you leveraging emojis in your company? I am an emoji queen. The first thing I ever do when I join an organization is I say, what emojis are they using here, right? Are they using emojis that connotate praise, collaboration, and a little sense of quirkiness? Thank you goes a long way. And then I go and I add those emojis and I deploy them in the organization, and I start to see more and more people using them. And so there's little things that we can do leveraging empathy to get the company to be a more collaborative culture. I'll get off my soapbox, but emojis, they're underestimated. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm.
For me, it's memes. Memes.
Memes are good too. And also gift channels too, right? So whenever I join an organization as well, I make a channel and it's just GIFs, no words, just GIFs. A lot of people who are a little bit more introverted, you want to get a pulse of how they're feeling. So maybe you have your team together and someone's really frustrated and they don't want to say anything, but you see them like with one of those, it's fine GIFs, right? You can use that, right? You can get a sense of how the person's feeling and you can check in with them too. But these are just some things that you can do around culture, Bhavani, too, when you're thinking about burnout. And the other thing too is, like you said, Maaike, too, those allies go so far. And sometimes it's just checking in to see how they're doing. That's all.
Okay.
We have another question here. This is really good. Bianca, are you there as well? I always do this to people. I'm so sorry, Bianca. Bianca had a quick question, wanted to know, how do you deal with time and budget constraints while pushing for learning and helping with DevOps topics? Think fast-paced agile environment, short sprints, loads of features to test, stakeholder reviews, etc. Help.
Honestly, that wasn't my concern. Like it wasn't up to me to figure out the budget. And I wasn't operating at that level. I was just someone in the teams. And it was not up to me to push the learning, because it was almost the other way around. Like, we as the testers, we wanted to learn, so it was a pull, I guess. Then we wanted to, and because the organization as a whole, it was their goal, their vision to move to this DevOps culture. So I'm guessing that they were okay with, within reasonable constraints, of course, they were okay with whatever was needed in order to get everyone up to speed. They knew that was probably a hump that we would not need to get over together. So yeah, I do think that the output of what we produced in one sprint was less for a bit of time, but that's almost unavoidable. And that was okay, because we also got a lot back from it. That's the best answer I can give, I think.
Was that helpful for you, Bianca? You can feel free to let us know in the chat, or if you want to expand upon that too. I have another great question here from Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Hey.
Hey, do you feel like asking your question?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a dev. I really like test-driven development. I really like continuous integration and DevOps. And in that, you tend to have two developers you tend to do pairing, you tend to have a couple of developers, and they're both kind of smashing out code and writing tests, seeing the test files, shipping. So what I'm not very good at, I think, is kind of understanding that, like, testing is a different discipline. And I'm not sure how to get a tester and go, well, I want to grab everything I can out of your learning and your different perspective as part of a pairing session. So not like pilot and co-pilot, but like pilot and navigator. It's a different role. I don't quite know how to invite in testers without saying you have to be a dev. I wonder if you had any experience of being included into some sort of into that world, as it were.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, what I started doing is, because I wanted to learn more about what it means to be a developer, I did pair up with the developer, but the purpose was not just to write tests, but to really make a feature work. So we did like everything together. So we wrote the code, we wrote the tests, but then also we tested it on a higher level. So we also did the exploratory testing together and made sure that it went through the CI/CD pipeline. So like everything was together. And that's why I was like, yeah, what is my role here anyway? I'm a tester, but I'm also learning more about what it means to code. And even though, yeah, the developer, of course, was more often the one typing it in so the computer is satisfied, but it did feel like I could contribute. But it did ask something from the developers, and not every developer was as good at that, because they had to be really explicit about what they were doing and why. But the funny thing is, if you do that, then you also give me the option to start asking questions like, hey, why are you doing that? And
Cool.
So
right, so thinking out loud and making everything
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
That really helped me, and yeah, that's when you really have the power of two brains, or in a mob you have even more brains, and then everyone can help. But you really have to make it explicit, to make it tacit. No, not tacit, explicit. Yeah.
Thanks, Chaz. Yeah, that's really helpful.
I really appreciate that. And I had a follow-up question to that, because this is something I've been, talking with a certain leader, and they're really struggling right now to get pairing even happening. The developers we work with, they don't see it, they don't want it, they don't necessarily have the full support from management. And I know part of the, scaring and caring is also about leading upwards, right? And so I'm wondering, what would be your best advice to try and help communicate the value of why pairing would be helpful?
Oof, that's a tough one. Honestly, managers, I don't care to convince them. I would just go for do it and ask forgiveness later, that thing. But if the developers don't want it, yeah, that's a different thing entirely. And I don't really have advice here. The only thing I would ask that person is, like, really, there are 0 allies, 0 people who want this? If that's still a yes, I would get out. But that's just me.
Yeah,
I knew you were going to say that. And Tara as well. Hi, Tara. How are you? You had a great comment in the chat. Would you feel like saying that out loud?
Sure. I came from a team where anytime that my devs started asking questions and getting excited about testing, my energy level went through the roof, and I was more than happy to spend time and pick their brain and let them pick my brain. So I think just making sure that those lines of communication are open and being humble about the stuff that you don't know how to do ultimately proved the best tool for me and my teams.
I love that. And there was an additional question that I had in here too. This was something we were thinking about, and something in our previous conversations as well. We had talked before kind of around caring so much that we're very vocal, and it can come across as scary, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. How do you strike that balance in your own work? So that you're leaving room for others to talk, but at the same time communicating with a sense of urgency? Because I think sometimes like good intentions get misconstrued.
Yeah, that's my continuous struggle. Let's put it like that. Because like I said in the talk, I do try to change my ways to be like the style I used to employ a lot was to be really like cursing and like, oh, this is terrible, this sucks. And yeah, it doesn't really work with a lot of people. Some people find it hilarious, but some people truly don't find it hilarious. So I'm trying to be more gentle. And I save the true rages for when it's truly warranted. So when you really have something extremely terrible happening and you're like, holy shit, we should drop everything right now and fix this, that it still has an impact. Because if you're constantly, oh my God, then you're like the boy who cried wolf. They don't take you seriously anymore. So in general, I try to be more gentle, more kind, and I would never go for an ad hominem thing. And if it's truly something terrible, then I would be like, oh, we have to fix this now. But it's not always easy. Like if I'm PMSing really hard, then yeah, those days it's tough.
It's a real struggle too. Also, the communicating offline versus the meetings and things getting misconstrued, working with international teams, trying to avoid slang and jargon, all that.
Yep.
Michael has his hand up. Hello, Michael.
Yeah, hello, thank you. I wanted to add to this in terms of the communication forms. I always try to do the things that I dislike the most. As a developer, I started recently then to run our retrospective. So I didn't like the outcome of our retrospective that much. And I offered myself to run this because I try to facilitate so that everybody can try to speak out. And that changed the value for the thing for me personally. So that makes it much better and also helps what you just said to reduce one's own loudness or grumpiness or sarcasm, whatever, name it. If you're enraged about something, that helps a lot. Yeah.
I love that. Wait, can we do like a Freaky Friday? Y'all, you know, like the film where the daughter and the mom switch, but we get like a dev and a tester to switch. I love this idea about running a retro. Well, I don't know what the counter would necessarily be that your teams are comfortable with, but Freaky Fridays, we need to make that a thing where people switch. I love this idea of developers running retros. That is brilliant. Thank you for that. Freaky Fridays. We're gonna have to think about this offline and what that would look like. Go ahead, Michael.
This is everything about perspective, and that was my first mention in the chat. As a library developer, hearing Maaike speak about less testing is scary because as a developer, I want to make the computer happy and I want to write those tests myself. But you, of course, speak about a much higher level about testing. Yeah. And I found the perspective in this talk really intriguing for me. I don't deal that much with how our library is used. So I value such insight from people that test on a higher level a lot. And also what you mentioned, changing perspective by going to the SRR team or to the customer success. Customer success is always a great group of people to reach out to because they basically know what they're dealing with, and just helps to be open to other groups in the company and not saying I'm a developer, I don't care about shit. And
exactly. And the developers had to change too. Like it wasn't a one-way street. It wasn't that only the testers had to change, the developers too. And yes, we lost some people because not everyone was willing to do that. So some people left because, like I said, no judgment. They felt more comfortable when their role was more certain and clear to them. So it's not for everyone, I guess.
And I appreciate that. And as we close here, because I know everyone's always in back-to-back meetings, God bless us all. I had a quick question, one last one too. I was thinking a little bit more around this disconnect that I often see from stakeholders, the ones that are purchasing the software or driving the business, and the actual end user that's out there and implementing these. I'm wondering if you could wave a magic wand. What's one thing that you wish CIOs and CTIs knew about the human costs of shifting left and impact on team performance?
I wish they knew that in order for that to truly work, you have to believe the testers when we point out the risks and we point out the edge cases, because nothing is more demoralizing if you're like refining a story, you're going over the risk, and everything you mention is being, tossed away as, oh no user will ever do that, or oh no, that's an edge case. No, no one is going to do that, and that makes you feel so, not valued. That is really demotivating. So, and it's a catch-22. I mean, if you think about it,
Mhm.
all the bugs you try to avoid, you can't prove that you avoided them. So that's a nice catch-22. And because it's invisible, sometimes people don't get it, why it's important. And it's easy to, you know, just like wave it away. Like, oh no, it doesn't matter. So I wish they would get that.
I love that. I think that's brilliant. I wanted to say too, just make sure I have a little buffer for people in their next meetings. I want to say thank you again, Maaike, for sharing. I just adore you. And if y'all are not already following Maaike on Twitter, you need to. It's spicy, good pragmatism like we all deserve. With that said, to everyone who came today, who was watching this recording, I know the holidays are coming up, so I'm just wishing y'all and your loved ones and teams and everyone a fabulous rest of the week and year. And we will be throwing a fun community event. It's going to be All I Want for Christmas is DevOps. It's not going to be recorded, so come as you are, bring your favorite beverage. We're going to have different themed breakout rooms with different leaders. It's going to be a lot of fun. So check it out. If you're following Provar, you can find it on our website, but just something fun for the community. With that said, you all are absolutely fabulous. We love you so much. Until next time, ta-ta for now. Bye.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye.